Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, welcome back, all you citizens of the world. Welcome to the first segment of this week's Live from the Heartland. We're talking about the week of October 24th, and we're going to take a little trip out to Logan Square. It's a neighborhood that's gone through a lot of changes. I've been running in and out of there since the middle 60s, and it's a different place than it used to be. I'm accompanied now by my good pal, the Professor Euan Hague, and he's also an academic dean at DePaul. And he has got two young activists to join us today. I don't know if I'll get the names correct, but we have Mia Carbajal and we have Susan Yanun. Welcome to both of you. And one of you is with a group, a community land trust dedicated to affordable housing called Here to Stay. And Susan is with LSNA, Palenque LSNA, and that's for Liberating Spaces Through Neighborhood Action. We like that. So hello to you, Euan, and hello to both of you. Welcome to the show. How about starting us off, Euan?
Yeah, hi. I thought it'd be really good to take a deep dive into this one area of the city that's seeing a lot of housing pressures. And I've been working a little bit myself with Here to Stay Community Land Trust over the last 6 months. We have a strong partnership through our through DePaul University with Here to Stay. A number of us are sort of helping them out with various student projects. But I thought it'd be really great to hear from Mia and Susan about what's going on in the neighborhood. So let's just hit the intros. Mia, tell us a little bit about what it is Here to Stay is doing and how you're involved.
Sure. Thank you, Euan, and thanks for the invitation to be here, Michael. So the Here to Stay Community Land Trust is a nonprofit organization that has the power and ability to acquire land and housing and steward it for long-term community benefit. And the way that looks like, it's a very flexible model. There's about 300 throughout the country, and it's expanded to internationally across borders, but in markets like Logan Square and Humboldt Park and Mimosa, that's seeing a lot of pressures from gentrification, a lot of displacement. We use it as a way to keep housing perpetually affordable for longtime residents that have been priced out of the market. And so Here to Stay was born with sort of that mandate. How do we keep homes in the building so that long-term residents, people with roots in the neighborhoods that we serve, which is Logan Square, Humboldt Park, and Mimosa, and Avondale, parts of those. How do we ensure that there's long-term affordability for these families and home ownership opportunities? And so we acquire homes, and then once it's in our possession, we use a legal mechanism called a 99-year ground lease, which is renewable and inheritable. And the ground lease allows us to sell the buildings or the improvements on the land. Improvements is just a word for anything that sits on land. In this case, it would be the homes that we purchase. So we can sell those to individuals and families, but we keep the land in ownership of Here to Stay of the organization. And what's a really cool feature of the Here to Stay of the Community Land Trust model is that it is collectively governed by community members and people that live on the land. And so it's a democratically governed organization that keeps land in perpetual community control while also perpetually affordable. The ground lease restricts the resale. So any family that buys a Here to Stay home purchases the home with the understanding that in the event that they ever want to move or leave, they will pay it forward, in a sense, to the next qualifying buyer in the community. And in that way, the home stays perpetually affordable.
Right. And you're just to flip it over to Susan, you're Logan Square and the neighborhoods Hermosa or so forth that Mia mentioned. This is where your organization is working as well. What are the pressures that you're seeing? What are the issues in that part of the city?
Yes. Thanks for having us on. I'm from Palenque LSNA, and we are like a 60-year-old community organization working in that area of the city that Mia mentioned. And we do planning processes. We have a holistic plan that we update regularly. But when we did our last comprehensive plan in 2018, what we were really seeing is like Logan Square was already so expensive. It was, as Mia said, very hard for people to stay in the community. There were all sorts of pressures, both from people who were renters to homeowners who couldn't pay their property taxes, people who had to move out. And we saw, for example, that in Hermosa, which is just to the west of Logan Square, homes were still affordable, but they were being flipped. So there was an investor that would buy it for about $100,000. And then less than a year later, they would be on the market for $320,000. And so people who would have been able to buy a $100,000 home, people in our community, because they were competing with a cash buyer who didn't even need a mortgage, they could just do it from one day to the next. Just regular homeowners, regular people looking for homes were priced out of the market, and they were not able to compete under those circumstances. And so in our planning process, we really wanted to figure out a way to interrupt that, so that regular people would still be able to buy homes. And there were three other organizations along with Palenque LSNA, Spanish Coalition for Housing, Center for Changing Lives, and LUCHA, which is a redevelopment corporation, all together said, what is the best way to do that? How can we interrupt this process? And after doing some research and really learning about these other community land trusts, both very popular on both coasts, but we do have a really successful model of a community land trust that operates in the northern suburbs called CEPA. We decided that was really the way to go. And so in 2019, we started a new organization, and started to try to do all of those things that Mia was discussing.
Where is CEPA? What suburb?
It is in Highland Park is where it was based. And now they also have properties in Evanston, in Lake Forest, and Libertyville, all in that area.
So I think it's interesting, Mia, you were telling us about how these houses are bought, so to speak. You're still, people who are working with you are still, it's as if they own their own home. Well, they do own their own home. They own the lease for 99 years. So it's just like you have the house and you can do with it what you will, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So the ground lease lays out all of the rights of the homeowners who purchase the home and the rights of the land trust. They're leasing the land. The home is there. So they still have to go through the traditional home buying process. They have to get a mortgage with one of the lenders that we work with that recognize our model. And once they purchase the home, they can paint it, they can, do all kinds of things that any homeowner would do. If they want to pass it on to a family member, they can do that once they pass it in the event. We do have a couple of qualifications and just things that we require through the ground lease. For example, the homeowner has to live in the home. So we don't support a model where there's like an absent homeowner. You have to live in the home. We also have 2 units and 3 units in our property. And we also require, even if you wanted to rent some of those units, you would still need to live in one of them. And so the purpose of the model is really for people that want to stay in place, that see the value of this neighborhood, that have connections to this neighborhood and trying to stay rooted in that way. And they do still make some modest equity appreciation in the event that they do decide to sell. There is a limited appreciation that the resale formula that's built into the ground lease supports. And so in that way, they have all of these rights. And one of the things that I mentioned is when we purchase the building, we do reduce the cost. So when we go out there, we're competing in the regular market, sometimes purchasing at prices that Susan's has mentioned. But through public investment and subsidy, we're able to reduce the cost. And so on average, we're selling our homes for 75% of what the regular market is, which is a huge cost, brings down the price significantly so that homeowners can afford it.
Mm-hmm. Let me jump in and ask, are banks cooperative with you, or do you have any resistance to that? I think you mentioned, sometimes not.
Sure. Thanks really in great part to Susan and a lot of the initial board members who were able to foster some of these relationships and CEPA's establishment, in this role. We do have 3 lenders that we work with: Huntington Bank, Wintrust Bank, and Old National. All recognize the community land trust model and have issued mortgages to our home buyers. Mm-hmm. So we're fortunate in Chicago to have those partnerships.
Could I jump in one more time and just ask, what's the change in the neighborhood and how rapid has it been? I remember the 60s, it was like Latinos were moving in. It was a lot of white working class people. I lived right up near the circle. and also down at Armitage and Kedzie. And it was rough edged, but now it's pretty slick when you drive through there. What about how's the changes come about?
Yeah. So, when I first started in Logan Square, it was about 65% Latino at that point. And it was a mix of Puerto Rican, Mexican, and others from Central South America, the Caribbean. But over time, and we mentioned the gentrification of Logan Square kind of moved up the blue line up Milwaukee Avenue. And I think it was 2010 was the first time that Logan Square became, again, a majority white neighborhood. And so the percentages basically flipped. So now it's about 30% Latino. In the same time, Hermosa, the neighborhood just to the west, it's been a strong immigrant Latinx community. I think it was about 88% Latino, the last census, and it's decreased, but it's still strong, strong Latino identity. And I say identity because that is something that's so important to us when we talk about the legacy families that are there. Logan Square, people, it's really hard when you kind of feel like your identity, your culture is erased from a space. And that's really what it seems like. And when you drive or take the bus or walk up Milwaukee Avenue now, what used to be mom and pop stores, the mega mall where businesses got their first start, lots of young people got their first job, they're now just replaced by these really, kind of no character, big, 4, 5, 6-story buildings with a Target, all of these different things that just could be anywhere in the city and not really like what we know and think of when we think of Logan Square. So it's really important to us to try to find ways with the construction of La Placita, which is the placita that's going to be that's being constructed right outside the Logan Square Blue Line, that it really just makes sure that we don't have that erasure of the Latino community, that people can still see themselves reflected in the public spaces. And in Hermosa, we're really trying to do the same thing, while it is still very much a Latina community.
I'm reminded of a study we did internally at DePaul about the displacement that has been accelerated by the 606, particularly in the within like a mile of the 606, and particularly accelerating towards the western end of it. I mean, anecdotally, that seems to be the case, and the data seems to back it up. I'm wondering what your experiences of that have been.
No, absolutely. I know that Logan Square, when the 606 they started construction, we had the highest number of demolitions in the entire city. And again, so naturally occurring 2 and 3 flats where they were affordable, a homeowner lived there and then rented it out to a relative or just, a friend. And it was naturally occurring. Those were being torn down or completely gutted and just made into single family homes that were like $1 million plus homes along the 606. So we have done things as part of Palenque LSNA where I work to mitigate that by having a preservation, like a tear down ordinance. We started the Northwest Side Preservation Ordinance, which really puts a steep price on demolitions. So people have to really take that into consideration if they want to demolish a 2 or 3 flat in the area. So I think that those are some of the things that have helped. If somebody demolishes a property in the area and they have to pay the fee, which is now $20,000 per unit up to $60,000, that funding would eventually go to Here to Stay to try to replace that affordable homeownership options and naturally occurring rental housing in the area.
Mia, can you tell a little bit about how your 2 organizations work together and how they came together?
Yeah, so Palenque LSNA is one of our founding members, and I often call it our organizing arm. It's so rare, I think, and for community land trusts that have to often do the advocacy and the education, right? Teaching public officials, teaching banks, teaching all these partners what the model is. Palenque really laid a lot of the groundwork for that, educating our public officials and other folks about this tool that the community can use to preserve assets in the community for perpetual affordability so that they're remain accessible to people in the community. And so through sort of the policy advocacy that Palenque has been able to do, such as that tear down ordinance, that ends up turning into subsidy that Here to Stay can use to buy down the price of homes that we then resell to members of the community that have roots in those neighborhoods. I think we've also worked together just like on outreach, on getting the word out. We have an information session every month for potential buyers, prospective buyers to come learn about us. And it's, through opportunities such as events that we can get the word out. And on our board, Palenque is represented on our board, as well as the other founding organizations to keep sort of that community voice represented in the affairs of the CLT.
The name Palenque captured my attention. I remember climbing a pyramid in Palenque, and I wondered if, Susan, you could tell us how that you came up with that name and what it means. I think it has something to do with freed slaves and where they lived. Fill our listeners in on that.
Right. So in 2020, which was such a critical year, we also had a new executive director come in after we'd had the same executive director for about 25 years. And she is somebody that grew up in the community. She's Puerto Rican and Ecuadorian roots. And this was the time of the pandemic, of the George Floyd murder and the disturbances that we had in the city, and really was thinking about, like, what do we want to be? We want to take care of one another. We want to provide the solidarity and mutual aid. And we also really want to be fighting for systemic change. And she said it basically she was a Latin American studies major herself and said, we want to be like a Palenque. And Palenques were these areas in Latin America and really around the Americas where people who were escaping slavery would go and create their own society. And they would be taking care of each other and fighting the systems of oppression that oppress them.
Right. I'm going to get real specific, Mia. Tell me about 2368 West Cortlandt.
Yes, that's our first new construction project. And so we have mostly built our portfolio through the acquisition of existing homes, rehabilitating them, and then selling them to buyers. So for 2638 Cortlandt, that lot was actually donated to us by the neighbor. There's a story about it. And I think Crane's published an article about how that came to be. And so when we got this lot, we originally were going to rebuild a 3-unit on there because that was previously demolished. But then, we started to talk to our partners and other folks, and they were like, there's precedent in the neighborhood for a 6-unit building, and that would bring, a lot of density to the neighborhood, maximizing that space. And it's also in an ETOD area, so an equitable transit-oriented development area that benefits from the Connected Communities Ordinance that doesn't, that says that we don't need to provide parking, because it's all about making housing oriented around the transit that's available. And so we took a leap, won a zoning change, and now we're heading into construction. So we had our groundbreaking back in October 3rd, earlier this month. And so once it's built, it will be a 6-unit building, 1 and 2 bedrooms that will also be permanently affordable and accessible to community members. We're very excited about this model.
Do either of your organizations have plans to expand, or are there other people in the wings that are learning from you? I mean, we have a lot of neighborhoods where people are being pushed out of Uptown, Rogers Park, et cetera, et cetera. What's your plans for the future to make this a broader movement?
It's a great question. There's about 7 to 8 land trusts in Chicago that are various stages of their organizational development. We have many in Austin and other areas, I believe, like Uptown, that are in the emerging stages. putting together bylaws. It takes a lot of work to put up a land trust. Okay, it's starting a whole new nonprofit organizations. It's a lot of operational capacity, and it really takes community members to get involved, right? If there is a local community land trust effort in your neighborhood, it takes community members, people like Susan, people like other folks on our board that are retired that just care about this to like go in and bring in the skills that they can to bring it up. And that's something that I would encourage Chicagoans in neighborhoods that are interested in this model or other shared equity models is how can you get involved? It really does start from the grassroots. But there are different efforts, different stages, and we try to be a mentor. We try to support other land trusts. We're always available. We're always, letting folks see our pro formas, our different documents to try to support their efforts to try to lift up a land trust.
We got a couple minutes left. Susan, how can people find out more about Palenque?
Well, I mean, for Palenque, you can go to our website, palenquelSNA.org. For Here to Stay, it's Here to Stay CLT.org.
Yes.
And yeah, we just encourage people to go to the websites, learn more. I agree. Just like we learned so much from SEPA and others who've come before us, Here to Stay is incredibly generous with their time and trying to spread the model. It really is such a beautiful, democratic, and great model for all sorts of communities, not just gentrifying and high-income communities, but in other ways, which we didn't even get into, all sorts of communities. So we ask that you, go give us a call, look at the website, and there are plenty of ways to get involved in your own community or in ours. We are also about community building.
I want to thank you both, Mia and Susan, for joining us. I really want to thank Euan for also joining us and making this interview happen.